Question 1. Process analysis reveals that an applicant for a New Zealand firearms license, Category H for target pistol shooting, has a history of domestic disputes, some of which involve police attendance. Although the applicant states these occurred several years ago and have been resolved, the applicant is now seeking to obtain a license for competitive target shooting. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing authority? Option A. Advise the applicant that due to the history of domestic disputes, they are permanently ineligible to hold a firearms license in New Zealand, regardless of current circumstances. Option B. Grant the firearms license, as the applicant states the disputes are in the past and they have no current intention of misusing the firearm for target shooting. Option C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the nature and resolution of the past domestic disputes, seeking relevant records and potentially further information from the applicant to determine if they currently meet the criteria of being a fit and proper person under the Arms Act 1983. Option D. Dismiss the domestic disputes as irrelevant to the firearms license application, as they are not recent and have been resolved by the applicant. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the nature and resolution of the past domestic disputes, seeking relevant records and potentially further information from the applicant to determine if they currently meet the criteria of being a fit and proper person under the Arms Act 1983. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a personal relationship and the strict requirements for maintaining firearm license eligibility in New Zealand. The applicant's history of domestic disputes, even if resolved, raises significant concerns regarding their suitability to possess a firearm, particularly a Category H pistol, which is intended for target shooting and requires a high degree of responsibility and public safety consideration. Careful judgment is required to balance the applicant's right to apply for a license with the paramount duty to ensure public safety and uphold the integrity of the firearms licensing system. The best professional approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the applicant's current circumstances and past behavior, strictly adhering to the provisions of the Arms Act 1983 and the Arms Regulations 1992. This includes obtaining all relevant information, such as police records, and potentially seeking further clarification from the applicant regarding the nature and resolution of past disputes. The focus must be on whether the applicant currently meets the criteria for being a fit and proper person, as defined by the legislation, which explicitly considers past conduct that might indicate a propensity for violence or a disregard for the law. The licensing authority has a statutory obligation to refuse a license if there is any doubt about the applicant's suitability, and a comprehensive, evidence-based assessment is the only way to fulfill this duty. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the applicant's past domestic disputes as irrelevant simply because they are not recent or have been resolved. The Arms Act 1983, Section 25, requires the licensing authority to be satisfied that the applicant is a fit and proper person to possess a firearm. This assessment is not limited to the immediate present, but can and should consider past behavior that demonstrates a lack of judgment, a propensity for violence, or an inability to manage conflict responsibly. Failing to investigate these matters thoroughly, or accepting the applicant's self-assessment without independent verification, would be a significant regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the license based solely on the applicant's assurance that the disputes are in the past and that they have no current intention of misusing the firearm. While intent is a factor, the licensing authority's duty is to assess the applicant's overall suitability, which includes their past conduct as an indicator of future behavior. Overlooking documented history of domestic disputes, which are often indicators of underlying issues related to anger management or conflict resolution, would be a failure to exercise due diligence and could compromise public safety. A further incorrect approach would be to allow personal sympathy for the applicant's desire to participate in target shooting to override the legal requirements for license issuance. While understanding the applicant's motivations is part of the process, the primary consideration must always be public safety and adherence to the Arms Act 1983. Personal feelings should not influence an objective assessment of whether the applicant meets the stringent criteria for possessing a firearm. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of all available information, a clear understanding of the relevant legal framework, Arms Act 1983, and Arms Regulations 1992, and an objective assessment of the applicant's fitness and propriety. This includes seeking independent verification of information, considering the potential risks to public safety, and making a decision based on evidence and legal requirements, rather than personal opinions or assumptions. When in doubt, the principle of erring on the side of caution to protect public safety should guide the decision-making process. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that an applicant for a New Zealand firearms license, Category H, has a history that includes a conviction for disorderly conduct 5 years ago, which involved a verbal altercation. The applicant states their sole purpose for seeking the license is for competitive target pistol shooting. What is the most appropriate course of action for the New Zealand police as the licensing authority to take? Option A. Immediately refuse the firearms license application based on the past conviction for disorderly conduct, as this indicates a potential lack of judgment. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's criminal record and engage in a direct, professional interview with the applicant to discuss the circumstances of the past incident, their current intentions, and any evidence of rehabilitation before making a determination on their suitability. Option C. Rely on anecdotal information from community members regarding the applicant's past behavior and deny the license based on these unverified reports. Option D. Grant the firearms license without further investigation, assuming the applicant's stated intention for target shooting is genuine and the past incident is not relevant to firearm possession. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's criminal record and engage in a direct, professional interview with the applicant to discuss the circumstances of the past incident, their current intentions, and any evidence of rehabilitation before making a determination on their suitability. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's stated intent for a firearms license with potential concerns about their suitability, as indicated by past behavior. The New Zealand Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations, particularly those pertaining to the fit and proper person test for firearms license holders, demand a thorough and objective assessment of an applicant's history and current circumstances. The core of the challenge lies in discerning genuine intent from potential risk, necessitating a decision that upholds public safety without unfairly penalizing an individual. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's history, including the specific incident mentioned, and a direct, professional conversation to understand the context and any mitigating factors. This approach aligns with the spirit and letter of the Arms Act 1983, which mandates that the licensing authority must be satisfied that the applicant is a fit and proper person to possess a firearm. This includes considering any past behavior that might indicate a propensity for violence, irresponsibility, or a disregard for the law. By seeking further information and engaging with the applicant, the licensing authority can make an informed decision based on all available evidence, rather than making assumptions or relying solely on past, potentially outdated information. This demonstrates due diligence and adherence to the principle of natural justice, an approach that dismisses the application solely based on the past incident, without further investigation or opportunity for the applicant to explain, is procedurally unfair and potentially discriminatory. It fails to consider whether the applicant has demonstrated rehabilitation or whether the past incident is truly indicative of their current suitability. This approach risks violating the principles of fairness and proportionality. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the license without adequately addressing the concerns raised by the past incident. This would be a failure to exercise due diligence and could compromise public safety, directly contravening the primary objective of the Arms Act 1983. The licensing authority has a statutory duty to be satisfied of the applicant's suitability, and overlooking significant past behavior would be a dereliction of this duty. Finally, an approach that relies on hearsay or unsubstantiated rumors without seeking official records or direct clarification from the applicant is unprofessional and legally unsound. Decisions regarding firearms licenses must be based on credible evidence and a fair process. Professionals in this field should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes thoroughness, fairness, and adherence to the law. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant legal requirements and ethical considerations. 2. Gathering all available factual information, including official records and applicant statements. 3. objectively assessing the information against the legal criteria for suitability. 4. Engaging with the applicant to clarify any ambiguities or concerns. 5. Documenting the entire decision-making process meticulously. 6. Making a decision that is justifiable, proportionate, and prioritizes public safety while respecting individual rights. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that a Category H firearms license holder in New Zealand has recently been diagnosed with a mental health condition that, while currently managed, has in the past led to periods of significant distress and impaired judgment. The license holder is concerned about the implications for their license, but has not yet informed the New Zealand police. What is the most appropriate course of action for the license holder? Option A. Assume that since the condition is currently managed, it does not need to be reported to the New Zealand police. Option B. Discuss the situation with close friends and family to gauge their opinions before deciding whether to report it. Option C. Immediately inform the New Zealand police of the diagnosis and the history of distress, seeking their guidance on the next steps. Option D. Wait to see if the condition significantly impacts their behavior before reporting it to the New Zealand police. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform the New Zealand police of the diagnosis and the history of distress, seeking their guidance on the next steps. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a licensee's personal circumstances and their ongoing obligation to maintain fitness and propriety for possessing a firearms license. The New Zealand Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations, particularly those concerning the suitability of license holders, place a strong emphasis on public safety and responsible firearm ownership. A licensee's mental health, and any behavior that might indicate a risk to themselves or others, is a critical factor in determining their continued eligibility for a firearms license. The challenge lies in balancing the individual's right to privacy with the public's right to safety, and the licensee's duty to be transparent with the licensing authority. Best approach involves immediate and proactive disclosure to the New Zealand police, the licensing authority. This aligns with the ethical obligation of a firearms license holder to inform the police of any circumstances that might affect their suitability to possess a firearm, as stipulated by the Arms Act 1983. Specifically, Section 25 of the Act requires a license holder to notify the police of any change of address, and implicitly, any change in circumstances that could impact their fitness. Furthermore, the general principles of responsible firearm ownership, which underpin the entire licensing system, demand honesty and transparency. By reporting the situation, the licensee allows the police to conduct a proper assessment of their fitness, which may involve medical advice, and to make an informed decision about the license's validity. This demonstrates a commitment to public safety and adherence to the law. An incorrect approach would be to withhold this information, hoping the situation resolves itself or goes unnoticed. Failure to disclose breaches the licensee's legal obligation under the Arms Act 1983 to inform the police of relevant changes in circumstances that could affect their suitability. Ethically, it represents a serious lapse in judgment and a disregard for public safety, as it prevents the authorities from fulfilling their duty to assess risk. Another incorrect approach would be to only seek advice from friends or family without informing the police. While seeking support is important, it does not absolve the licensee of their legal and ethical responsibilities to the licensing authority. This approach prioritizes personal comfort over legal compliance and public safety. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to assume the condition is temporary and therefore not reportable. The Arms Act 1983 does not provide for a grace period for reporting changes in fitness. Any condition that could potentially impact the safe possession of firearms, regardless of perceived duration, should be disclosed to the police for their assessment. Professionals in similar situations should adopt a framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety. This involves understanding the specific reporting obligations under the relevant legislation. In this case, the New Zealand Arms Act 1983. When personal circumstances arise that could affect fitness for a license, the immediate step should be to consult the relevant regulatory body, the police, and provide full and honest disclosure. Seeking professional advice, legal or medical, can inform the disclosure process, but it should not replace it. The decision-making process should always weigh the potential risk to public safety against the individual's rights, with a clear emphasis on transparency and adherence to the law. Question 4. What factors determine whether a firearms dealer in New Zealand should proceed with a Category H license application for a target pistol shooter who has disclosed a history of minor, non-violent convictions from several years ago? Option A. Proceeding with the license application without further investigation, assuming minor past offenses are irrelevant to current suitability. Option B. A thorough assessment of the nature, recency, and relevance of the disclosed convictions against the criteria for license eligibility under the Arms Act 1983, and reporting any concerns to the police. Option C. Accepting the applicant's self-reported information about their past convictions without independent verification or consultation with the police. Option D. Automatic refusal of the license application due to any criminal record, irrespective of the offense's severity or age. The correct answer is B. A thorough assessment of the nature, recency, and relevance of the disclosed convictions against the criteria for license eligibility under the Arms Act 1983, and reporting any concerns to the police. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand when faced with a customer seeking a Category H license for target pistol shooting who has a history of minor, non-violent offenses. The challenge lies in balancing the legal requirements for license issuance with the ethical responsibility to ensure public safety and prevent the misuse of firearms. Careful judgment is required to assess the risk posed by the applicant without unfairly prejudicing them based on past minor transgressions. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the applicant's suitability, strictly adhering to the Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations in New Zealand. This includes verifying all documentation, conducting a comprehensive background check, and critically evaluating the nature and recency of the applicant's past offenses in the context of the Act's criteria for license eligibility. The dealer must consider whether the offenses demonstrate a propensity for violence, disregard for the law, or pose a risk to public safety, as stipulated by the Arms Act. If the offenses, despite being minor, indicate a pattern of behavior that raises concerns about the applicant's ability to safely and responsibly possess a firearm, the dealer has a duty to report these concerns to the police. This approach is correct because it prioritizes public safety and upholds the spirit and letter of New Zealand's firearms legislation, which is designed to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands. It requires a nuanced understanding of the law, not a blanket refusal or acceptance. An incorrect approach would be to automatically refuse the license solely because the applicant has a criminal record, regardless of the nature or age of the offenses. This fails to acknowledge that the Arms Act 1983 allows for discretion and requires an individual assessment of suitability. It is ethically problematic as it penalizes individuals for past minor indiscretions without considering their rehabilitation or current suitability. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the past offenses entirely and proceed with the license application without due diligence, assuming that minor offenses are irrelevant. This is a serious regulatory failure, as it neglects the dealer's responsibility to identify potential risks and could lead to a firearm being issued to someone who may pose a danger. It undermines the integrity of the licensing system and compromises public safety. Finally, an approach that involves accepting the applicant's word without independently verifying the details of their past offenses or their relevance to firearm safety would also be incorrect. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a failure to comply with the thorough vetting process mandated by the Arms Act. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a systematic review of the applicant's history against the specific criteria outlined in the Arms Act 1983. This includes understanding the definitions of prohibited person and the factors the police consider when assessing suitability. Professionals should always seek clarification from the police or the New Zealand Police Firearms Unit if there is any ambiguity regarding an applicant's eligibility or if their history raises concerns. The decision must be based on objective evidence and a clear understanding of legal obligations, rather than personal bias or assumptions. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a customer presents a valid Category H firearms license for the purchase of a target pistol at your licensed firearms dealership in Auckland, New Zealand. However, during the sales interaction, the customer is evasive when asked about their specific training for target pistol shooting and provides vague answers regarding their proposed secure storage arrangements for the firearm. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately report the customer's evasiveness to the New Zealand police without further interaction. Option B. Proceed with the sale as the customer has presented a valid Category H firearms license. Option C. Engage the customer in further discussion to clarify their training and storage plans, and if significant concerns remain, refuse the sale. Option D. Dismiss the customer's evasiveness as unimportant, assuming a valid license is sufficient. The correct answer is C. Engage the customer in further discussion to clarify their training and storage plans, and if significant concerns remain, refuse the sale. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand concerning the sale of a Category H target pistol firearm. The challenge lies in balancing the legal requirements for firearm sales with the ethical responsibility to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands, especially when a customer exhibits concerning behavior. The applicant's evasiveness about the intended use and their vague answers regarding storage and training raise red flags that require careful consideration beyond a simple check of their license validity. The best professional approach involves a thorough assessment of the applicant's suitability, going beyond the mere presentation of a valid license. This includes actively seeking clarification on any ambiguities or concerning aspects of the application and the applicant's demeanor. Specifically, it means engaging in a direct conversation with the applicant to understand their training, their intended use of the firearm, and their proposed storage arrangements. If, after this engagement, significant doubts persist about the applicant's ability to safely and lawfully possess the firearm, the dealer has a professional and ethical obligation to refuse the sale. This aligns with the spirit of the Arms Act 1983 and its regulations, which place a duty on dealers to ensure firearms are sold to persons who are fit and proper to possess them. The Arms Regulations 1992, particularly those pertaining to dealer responsibilities and license conditions, underscore the importance of due diligence. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sale solely based on the presentation of a valid Category H license, without further inquiry into the applicant's stated intentions or training. This fails to uphold the dealer's duty of care and could contravene the Arms Act's intent to prevent misuse of firearms. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the applicant's evasiveness as unimportant, assuming that a valid license is sufficient proof of suitability. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and an abdication of responsibility. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to report the applicant to the police without first attempting to resolve the concerns directly with the applicant through professional inquiry. While reporting is an option if serious concerns remain unresolved, bypassing direct communication in the first instance is not the most constructive or professionally sound initial step. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance. This involves 1. Identifying potential risks or red flags in an application or applicant behavior. 2. Actively seeking clarification and information to address these concerns through professional dialogue. 3. Evaluating the gathered information against legal requirements and ethical obligations. 4. Making a reasoned decision to proceed with the sale, request further information, or refuse the sale based on the assessment. Question 6. Process analysis reveals that a New Zealand resident presents a valid Category H firearms license for a target pistol. However, during the transaction, the individual exhibits an unusual level of nervousness and makes vague, somewhat aggressive comments about needing the firearm for personal protection, despite the license being for target shooting. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensed firearms dealer in New Zealand? Option A. Immediately refuse the sale based on the buyer's nervous demeanor and comments about personal protection, as this deviates from the stated purpose of a Category H license. Option B. Accept the firearms license at face value and complete the sale without any further inquiry, assuming the license holder is legally entitled to purchase the firearm. Option C. Proceed with the sale, but advise the buyer that the license is only for target shooting and they should not use it for personal protection, without further investigation into their concerns. Option D. Verify the validity and category of the firearms license, document the transaction, and proceed with the sale, while also discreetly noting the buyer's behavior and comments in the sales record. The correct answer is D. Verify the validity and category of the firearms license, document the transaction, and proceed with the sale, while also discreetly noting the buyer's behavior and comments in the sales record. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand concerning the sale of a Category H target pistol firearm. The challenge lies in balancing the legal requirements for firearm sales with the ethical responsibility to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands, especially when a potential buyer exhibits concerning behavior. The Firearms Act 1983 and its associated regulations, along with the Arms Regulations 1984, govern the sale and licensing of firearms in New Zealand. These laws mandate that a dealer must be satisfied that a buyer holds a valid firearms license for the specific category of firearm being purchased, and that the sale is otherwise lawful. Ethical considerations, as guided by professional conduct expectations for licensed firearms dealers, extend beyond mere legal compliance to include a duty of care to public safety. The best professional approach involves a thorough verification process that prioritizes safety and legal compliance. This includes meticulously checking the validity and category of the buyer's firearms license against the specific firearm being sold. Furthermore, it requires the dealer to exercise professional judgment, as permitted by law, to assess whether there are any grounds to believe the sale might be unsafe or unlawful, even if the license appears valid. This might involve discreet inquiries or observing the buyer's demeanor and stated intentions if they raise red flags, without making unsubstantiated accusations. The dealer must document all steps taken and the rationale behind their decision. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the legal obligation to confirm license validity and category, while also fulfilling the ethical imperative to act responsibly and prevent potential misuse of firearms. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sale solely based on the presentation of a firearms license without any further scrutiny, especially if the buyer's behavior or stated purpose for the firearm seems unusual or concerning. This fails to meet the dealer's duty of care and could potentially violate the spirit, if not the letter, of the law if the dealer had reasonable grounds to suspect the sale was not in the public interest. Another incorrect approach would be to refuse the sale outright based on a vague personal feeling or prejudice without any objective grounds or evidence that the buyer is not legally entitled to the firearm or that the sale would be unsafe. This could lead to a complaint against the dealer for unlawful refusal of sale if the buyer is indeed licensed and the sale is otherwise lawful. Finally, accepting a license that is clearly expired or for a different category of firearm is a direct contravention of the Firearms Act 1983 and the Arms Regulations 1984, exposing both the dealer and the buyer to legal penalties and compromising public safety. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of legal obligations. This is followed by an assessment of all available information, including the buyer's documentation and observable behavior. If any doubts or concerns arise, the professional should seek clarification or further information, always erring on the side of caution and public safety. Documenting the entire process, including any decisions made and the reasons behind them, is crucial for accountability and legal protection. Question 7. Quality control measures reveal that a New Zealand firearms license applicant for a Category H target pistol shooting license has, in their application, briefly mentioned a period of anxiety and depression several years ago, which they state they have fully recovered from and are now managing well. They express strong enthusiasm for joining a local pistol club and participating in competitive shooting. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing authority? Option A. Conduct a thorough assessment of the applicant's current mental and physical fitness, including a detailed interview and verification of their stated purpose for the license, and if necessary, seek further information or clarification from the applicant or relevant professionals in accordance with the Arms Act 1983 and Arms Regulations 1992. Option B. Immediately deny the license application due to the mention of past mental health struggles, as this automatically disqualifies the applicant from being a fit and proper person. Option C. Inform the applicant that any history of mental health issues, regardless of recovery, makes them ineligible for a firearms license, and advise them to reapply only if they can prove a completely unblemished mental health record. Option D. Grant the license without further investigation, assuming the applicant's current enthusiasm and self-reported recovery are sufficient indicators of suitability. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough assessment of the applicant's current mental and physical fitness, including a detailed interview and verification of their stated purpose for the license, and if necessary, seek further information or clarification from the applicant or relevant professionals in accordance with the Arms Act 1983 and Arms Regulations 1992. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's stated intent for a firearms license with potential underlying risks that are not immediately apparent. The applicant's enthusiasm for target shooting is genuine, but the licensing authority has a duty of care to the public and must ensure that all license holders are fit and proper persons, free from any conditions that might make them a risk. The challenge lies in discerning the true nature of the applicant's intentions and mental state without infringing on their privacy or unfairly prejudicing their application, all within the strict legal framework of New Zealand's Arms Act 1983 and associated regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, objective, and evidence-based assessment of the applicant's suitability, adhering strictly to the requirements of the Arms Act 1983 and the Arms Regulations 1992. This means gathering all necessary documentation, conducting a comprehensive interview, and making reasonable inquiries to verify the applicant's stated purpose and assess their mental and physical fitness. If any concerns arise regarding the applicant's suitability, the appropriate course of action is to seek further information or clarification from the applicant or relevant third parties, with consent where required, and if necessary, consult with a medical practitioner or other qualified professional as permitted by law. This approach prioritizes public safety while ensuring fairness to the applicant, grounded in the legal obligation to determine if the applicant is a fit and proper person to possess a firearm. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the applicant's concerns about their past mental health struggles as irrelevant, assuming that their current desire for target shooting is sufficient proof of rehabilitation and current fitness. This fails to acknowledge the Arms Act's requirement to assess the applicant's overall suitability, which includes considering any history that might indicate a present risk, even if the applicant believes they are now well. It bypasses the due diligence required to ensure public safety. Another incorrect approach is to immediately deny the license based on a vague suspicion or a single mention of past mental health issues without conducting a proper investigation or seeking further information. This is an arbitrary decision that does not align with the principles of natural justice or the legal process for firearms licensing. It presumes guilt or unsuitability without due inquiry and fails to give the applicant an opportunity to demonstrate their current fitness. A third incorrect approach is to grant the license without adequately verifying the applicant's stated purpose for target shooting or assessing their understanding of safe firearm handling and storage. This could involve accepting the applicant's word at face value without confirming their membership in a recognized pistol club or their knowledge of safe practices, thereby potentially compromising public safety and contravening the spirit and letter of the Arms Act, which mandates responsible firearm ownership. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a systematic and objective decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding and strictly adhering to the legal requirements of the Arms Act 1983 and Arms Regulations 1992. 2. Conducting a comprehensive assessment that includes reviewing all submitted documentation, conducting a thorough interview, and making necessary inquiries. 3. Objectively evaluating all information gathered, paying particular attention to any factors that might affect the applicant's suitability as a fit and proper person. 4. If doubts or concerns arise, following established procedures to seek further clarification or evidence, including consulting with appropriate professionals if legally permissible and necessary. 5. Making a decision based on the totality of the evidence, ensuring it is fair, lawful, and prioritizes public safety. Question 8. Process analysis reveals that a customer presents a valid Category H firearms license in New Zealand and wishes to purchase a high-precision target pistol, stating they are a keen beginner in competitive shooting. The customer's stated experience level seems somewhat at odds with the advanced nature of the firearm they are requesting. What is the most responsible course of action for the firearms dealer? Option A. Advise the customer that the chosen firearm may be too advanced for a beginner and suggest a less sophisticated model without further inquiry into their stated intentions. Option B. Proceed with the sale as the customer possesses a valid firearms license, assuming their choice of firearm is a personal preference. Option C. Conduct a detailed discussion with the customer about their experience, training, and the specific discipline they intend to compete in, and document all interactions and assessments, reporting any unresolved concerns to the New Zealand police. Option D. Complete the sale quickly to avoid any potential discomfort for the customer, and assume the police will conduct their own checks if necessary. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed discussion with the customer about their experience, training, and the specific discipline they intend to compete in, and document all interactions and assessments, reporting any unresolved concerns to the New Zealand police. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand concerning the sale of a Category H target pistol firearm. The challenge lies in balancing the legal requirements for firearm sales with the ethical responsibility to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands, especially when a customer exhibits concerning behavior or provides questionable information. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with the Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations, as well as upholding the ethical duty of care expected of a firearms dealer. The best professional approach involves a thorough and documented assessment of the customer's eligibility and suitability, including verifying their firearms license and ensuring the intended use aligns with the license category. This includes actively seeking clarification on any ambiguities in the customer's stated purpose for the firearm, such as the need for a specific type of target pistol that might be unusual for a novice. A key ethical and regulatory consideration is the dealer's responsibility to report any doubts or suspicions about a customer's suitability to the New Zealand police. This proactive approach, documented meticulously, demonstrates due diligence and prioritizes public safety, aligning with the spirit and letter of New Zealand firearms law. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sale based solely on the presentation of a valid license, without further inquiry into the customer's experience or the specific suitability of the firearm for their stated purpose. This fails to acknowledge the dealer's broader responsibility to ensure firearms are not acquired by individuals who may pose a risk, even if they possess a license. Ethically, it prioritizes a sale over public safety. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the customer's request for a specific, high-performance target pistol as simply a matter of personal preference, without considering if this choice might indicate an intent or capability beyond what is typical for someone new to the sport. This overlooks the potential for misuse or the need for further guidance and training, which a responsible dealer should consider. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to avoid reporting any unease or suspicion to the police, perhaps due to a desire to avoid confrontation or a perceived lack of concrete evidence. This abdication of responsibility is a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as the police are the ultimate arbiters of firearm suitability and public safety. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the customer's background and intentions, coupled with a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves a proactive approach to risk assessment, clear communication with the customer, and a willingness to engage with the authorities when doubts arise. The process should be documented at each stage to provide a clear audit trail of the dealer's diligence. Question 9. Process analysis reveals a potential customer in New Zealand holding a valid Category H firearms license for target pistol shooting wishes to purchase a specific semi-automatic pistol. The applicant states they are a new member of a local pistol shooting club and have been attending regularly. As a firearms dealer, what is the most responsible course of action to ensure compliance with New Zealand firearms law? Option A. Verify the applicant's current membership status with the pistol shooting club and confirm the specific pistol is appropriate for the club's approved target shooting disciplines before completing the sale. Option B. Proceed with the sale immediately upon presentation of the valid Category H license, assuming the applicant's stated intentions are truthful. Option C. Refuse the sale because the applicant is a new member of the club and may not be fully vetted yet. Option D. Accept a verbal confirmation from the applicant's friend, who is a member of the same club, regarding the applicant's suitability for the purchase. Correct answer is A. Verify the applicant's current membership status with the pistol shooting club and confirm the specific pistol is appropriate for the club's approved target shooting disciplines before completing the sale. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand due to the strict regulatory environment surrounding firearms licensing, particularly for Category H, target pistol licenses. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's stated intention with the dealer's legal and ethical obligations to ensure firearms are not diverted for illicit purposes. The dealer must exercise due diligence without unduly obstructing legitimate sporting activities. The best professional approach involves a thorough, documented assessment of the applicant's eligibility and stated purpose, aligning with the Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations in New Zealand. This includes verifying the applicant's current membership in an approved pistol shooting club, confirming their license status, and documenting the specific firearm requested in relation to their club's approved activities. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal requirements for acquiring a Category H firearm, which necessitates proof of genuine participation in target shooting. It demonstrates responsible business practice by ensuring compliance with the Arms Act 1983, which mandates that firearms are only sold to licensed individuals for lawful purposes. Documenting these checks provides a defense against potential accusations of negligence or complicity in the misuse of firearms. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the sale based solely on the applicant presenting a valid license, without further verification of their club membership or the specific suitability of the firearm for their stated purpose. This fails to meet the spirit and letter of the Arms Act 1983, which aims to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands. The Act requires dealers to be satisfied that the firearm is appropriate for the license holder's stated purpose, and simply having a license is not sufficient proof of this. Another incorrect approach would be to refuse the sale outright without any investigation, simply because the applicant is new to the club. While caution is warranted, an outright refusal without due diligence could be seen as discriminatory and could impede legitimate sporting participation, which is a permitted use under the Arms Act 1983. The law requires a reasoned assessment, not an arbitrary denial. A further incorrect approach would be to rely on a verbal assurance from the club secretary, without obtaining written confirmation or checking the applicant's membership status directly with the club. This lack of documented verification leaves the dealer vulnerable and does not fulfill the requirement to ensure the firearm is for a lawful purpose. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and adhering to the specific requirements of the Arms Act 1983 and its regulations. This involves proactive verification of all stated conditions for firearm acquisition, maintaining detailed records of all transactions and due diligence steps, and seeking clarification from the New Zealand police or relevant authorities when in doubt. The process should be objective, evidence-based, and focused on fulfilling legal obligations while facilitating legitimate firearm ownership. Question 10. Benchmark analysis indicates a firearms dealer in New Zealand, licensed to sell Category H firearms, is processing an application for a target pistol. The applicant presents a valid Category H firearms license and states their genuine reason for purchase is competitive target pistol shooting. However, the applicant's declared income and financial history, as observed by the dealer during the transaction, suggest a significant disparity between their stated financial capacity and the expected costs associated with competitive target pistol shooting, including club fees, ammunition, range time, and equipment maintenance. If the applicant's total declared annual income is $$35,000 NZD, and the estimated annual cost for competitive target pistol shooting, including club membership, ammunition, range fees, and basic maintenance, is $$5,000 NZD, representing /frac 17 of their annual income. What is the most prudent course of action for the dealer to ensure compliance with the Arms Act 1983 and ethical sales practices? Option A. Suggest the applicant consider purchasing a less expensive firearm or engaging in a less costly shooting discipline, as their current financial situation may not be suitable for competitive target pistol shooting. Option B. Proceed with the sale immediately, as the applicant possesses a valid Category H firearms license and has stated a lawful purpose, without further questioning regarding their financial capacity. Option C. Politely inquire further about how the applicant plans to finance their participation in competitive target pistol shooting, requesting any available documentation that supports their ability to meet these costs, while proceeding with the sale if satisfactory clarification is provided and all other legal requirements are met. Option D. Refuse the sale outright due to the apparent financial strain the sport would place on the applicant, assuming they cannot genuinely afford to participate. Correct answer is C. Politely inquire further about how the applicant plans to finance their participation in competitive target pistol shooting, requesting any available documentation that supports their ability to meet these costs, while proceeding with the sale if satisfactory clarification is provided and all other legal requirements are met. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand, specifically concerning the sale of a Category H target pistol firearm. The challenge lies in balancing the legal requirements for sale with the ethical responsibility to ensure the firearm is not diverted for illicit purposes, especially when a buyer's stated purpose for purchase, target shooting, seems inconsistent with their financial capacity or other observable factors. The dealer must exercise due diligence without infringing on the buyer's rights or engaging in discriminatory practices. Careful judgment is required to interpret the nuances of the Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations, particularly concerning the genuine reason for acquiring a firearm. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and documented assessment of the buyer's stated genuine reason for acquiring the firearm, cross-referencing it with information available through the licensing process and any other legally permissible inquiries. This includes verifying the buyer's firearms license is current and appropriate for Category H firearm, and that the stated purpose of target shooting is supported by evidence, such as membership in an approved pistol club. If the buyer's financial situation appears to contradict their stated ability to engage in the sport, e.g., inability to afford club fees, ammunition, or range time, the dealer should politely and professionally seek clarification or further documentation. This approach aligns with the spirit of the Arms Act 1983, which requires a genuine reason for firearm possession and places a responsibility on dealers to ensure sales are lawful and safe. The dealer should document all inquiries and the buyer's responses, creating a clear audit trail. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with the sale without further inquiry, despite the financial discrepancy, would be professionally unacceptable. This approach fails to exercise due diligence and could inadvertently facilitate the acquisition of a firearm by someone who may not genuinely intend to use it for its stated lawful purpose, potentially violating the genuine reason requirement under the Arms Act 1983. Refusing the sale outright based solely on the buyer's apparent financial limitations, without further investigation or seeking clarification, could be considered discriminatory and may not be legally justifiable if the buyer otherwise meets all licensing and statutory requirements. While caution is warranted, an outright refusal without attempting to understand the situation could lead to a complaint or legal challenge. Suggesting alternative, less expensive firearms without addressing the core concern about the buyer's financial capacity to engage in target pistol shooting would also be professionally unsound. This sidesteps the due diligence required to confirm the genuine reason for purchasing the specific Category H firearm and does not resolve the underlying discrepancy. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a systematic approach to assessing firearm sales. This involves 1. Verifying all mandatory legal requirements, license validity, category appropriateness. 2. Critically evaluating the stated genuine reason against any available objective information or observable inconsistencies. 3. Engaging in polite, professional, and documented dialogue with the buyer to clarify any discrepancies. 4. Documenting the entire process, including inquiries made and responses received. 5. Consulting with senior management or regulatory bodies if significant doubts persist. This framework ensures compliance with the Arms Act 1983 and upholds the ethical responsibility to public safety. Question 11. The assessment process reveals an applicant for New Zealand Category H firearms license has provided documentation indicating a strong interest in competitive target pistol shooting. However, during the initial review, a minor discrepancy is noted regarding the precise details of their proposed storage arrangements, which are described vaguely as secure. What is the most appropriate course of action for the firearms officer to take? Option A. Focus the interview primarily on the applicant's general sporting achievements in other unrelated fields, assuming this demonstrates a responsible character suitable for firearm ownership. Option B. Immediately reject the application due to the vague description of storage, without providing the applicant an opportunity to clarify or rectify the information. Option C. Conduct a detailed interview with the applicant to clarify the specifics of their proposed storage arrangements. Inquire further about their understanding of safe storage requirements under New Zealand law, and verify their genuine reason for seeking the license. Option D. Grant the license based on the applicant's stated interest in target shooting, assuming that secure storage is sufficient and that further investigation is unnecessary. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed interview with the applicant to clarify the specifics of their proposed storage arrangements. Inquire further about their understanding of safe storage requirements under New Zealand law, and verify their genuine reason for seeking the license. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to demonstrate not only technical proficiency, but also a strong ethical compass and adherence to the strict legal framework governing firearms ownership in New Zealand. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's enthusiasm and stated intent with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety and preventing the misuse of firearms. Careful judgment is required to discern genuine intent from potential risks, particularly when dealing with a category of firearms suitable for target shooting, but also capable of causing harm if misused. The best professional approach involves a thorough and objective evaluation of all provided documentation and a direct, probing interview to clarify any ambiguities or concerns. This approach prioritizes the legal requirements of the Arms Act 1983 and the Arms Regulations 1992, specifically focusing on the applicant's suitability, genuine reason for possessing a firearm, and their understanding of safe storage and handling. By seeking direct confirmation and evidence, the assessor upholds the principle of due diligence, ensuring that the licensing decision is based on verifiable facts and a comprehensive assessment of risk, thereby safeguarding public safety and maintaining the integrity of the firearms licensing system in New Zealand. An approach that relies solely on the applicant's stated intent, without seeking further verification or clarification, is professionally unacceptable. This failure to probe deeper ignores the assessor's duty to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and could lead to a license being granted to an individual who may not fully meet the stringent requirements of the Arms Act 1983, potentially compromising public safety. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to dismiss the applicant's concerns about potential misuse as mere paranoia, without adequately exploring the applicant's understanding of security measures and their commitment to responsible firearm ownership. This dismissive attitude fails to acknowledge the seriousness of firearms control and the importance of the applicant demonstrating a clear and robust understanding of their legal obligations and the potential consequences of negligence. Finally, an approach that focuses excessively on the applicant's past recreational activities unrelated to firearms, while neglecting to thoroughly investigate their genuine reason for wanting a target pistol and their knowledge of safe storage, is also professionally flawed. This misdirection of focus means critical aspects of the licensing criteria, as outlined in New Zealand firearms legislation, are not adequately assessed, leaving potential gaps in the evaluation of the applicant's suitability. Professionals in this field should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation against the legal criteria. This should be followed by a structured interview designed to elicit specific information regarding the applicant's genuine reason, their understanding of safe storage and handling, and their awareness of their legal responsibilities. Any discrepancies or areas of concern should be thoroughly investigated through further questioning or requests for additional evidence. The final decision must be demonstrably based on the applicant's proven suitability and adherence to the Arms Act 1983 and its regulations, with public safety as the overriding consideration. Question 12. Process analysis reveals a license category. H firearms license holder in New Zealand approaches a firearms dealer requesting to purchase a specific firearm. While the customer is licensed for target pistol shooting, the firearm in question is not a conventional target pistol, but could potentially be adapted for such use. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action for the firearms dealer in this situation? Option A. Immediately process the sale, assuming that a valid Category H license holder is entitled to purchase any firearm they desire. Option B. Engage in a detailed discussion with the customer to understand their specific intended use for the firearm in relation to target pistol shooting, verify its suitability for that purpose, and document the conversation and the customer's explanation, ensuring compliance with the Arms Act 1983 and Arms Regulations 1992. Option C. Refuse the sale outright without further inquiry, based on the firearm not being a standard target pistol typically associated with Category H licenses. Option D. Advise the customer on how to alter the firearm's description or documentation to fit a more common category for target pistols, without verifying the legality of such changes. The correct answer is B. Engage in a detailed discussion with the customer to understand their specific intended use for the firearm in relation to target pistol shooting, verify its suitability for that purpose, and document the conversation and the customer's explanation, ensuring compliance with the Arms Act 1983 and Arms Regulations 1992. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand when a customer, who is a licensed Category H shooter, requests to purchase a firearm that is not typically used for target pistol shooting, but could be adapted. The challenge lies in balancing the customer's rights and preferences with the dealer's responsibility to ensure firearms are acquired and possessed lawfully and safely, adhering to the Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations. The dealer must exercise careful judgment to avoid facilitating the acquisition of a firearm for potentially prohibited purposes or in a manner that circumvents the spirit of the law, even if the customer holds a valid license. The best professional approach involves a thorough, documented inquiry into the customer's stated purpose for acquiring the firearm, cross-referencing this with the specific conditions of their Category H license and the nature of the firearm itself. This approach prioritizes due diligence and compliance. The dealer should engage in a detailed conversation with the customer to understand precisely how they intend to use the firearm for target pistol shooting, considering its suitability for that purpose. If the firearm is not a standard target pistol, the dealer must verify if the customer's license endorsements or the specific nature of the intended use aligns with the Arms Act 1983 and the Arms Regulations 1992. This includes confirming that the firearm is not a prohibited firearm under the Act and that the intended use does not fall outside the scope of a Category H license. Documenting this conversation and the customer's explanation is crucial for demonstrating responsible practice and compliance. An incorrect approach would be to immediately process the sale simply because the customer possesses a valid Category H license. This fails to acknowledge the dealer's responsibility to assess the suitability of the specific firearm for the stated purpose and the potential for misuse or circumvention of regulations. The Arms Act 1983 places an onus on dealers to be satisfied that a sale is lawful and appropriate. Another incorrect approach is to refuse the sale outright without further investigation, solely based on the firearm not being a typical target pistol. While caution is warranted, a blanket refusal without understanding the customer's specific, lawful intentions could be seen as discriminatory or an overreach of the dealer's authority, provided the customer can demonstrate a legitimate and lawful purpose within their license category. A third incorrect approach involves advising the customer on how to modify the firearm or its documentation to fit a standard category, without verifying the legality and safety of such modifications and their alignment with the Arms Act 1983. This could inadvertently lead to the facilitation of an illegal or unsafe firearm acquisition. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the customer's request, then meticulously consulting the relevant legislation, Arms Act 1983 and Arms Regulations 1992, assessing the specific firearm against license conditions and prohibited firearm categories, engaging in open and honest communication with the customer, and thoroughly documenting all interactions and decisions. This ensures both legal compliance and ethical conduct. Question 13. Compliance review shows an applicant for a New Zealand firearms license, Category H for target pistol shooting, has submitted all required forms, including 2 character references. The applicant states their sole purpose is participation in organized target pistol shooting competitions. What is the most appropriate next step for the licensing authority? Option A. Deny the firearms license due to a subjective feeling of unease about the applicant's demeanor during a brief, informal interaction prior to the formal application. Option B. Approve the firearms license, but add a condition requiring the applicant to immediately join a recognized shooting club without further verification of their stated purpose. Option C. Conduct a detailed interview with the applicant to verify their stated purpose, discuss their experience with firearms, and explore their understanding of safe storage and handling, while also reviewing the submitted references. Option D. Approve the firearms license immediately based on the completeness of the submitted documentation and the positive nature of the character references. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed interview with the applicant to verify their stated purpose, discuss their experience with firearms, and explore their understanding of safe storage and handling, while also reviewing the submitted references. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's stated intention for a firearms license with potential indicators of risk, necessitating a thorough and objective assessment. The challenge lies in discerning genuine intent from potential misuse, while adhering strictly to the Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations in New Zealand. The assessor must avoid personal bias and ensure all decisions are grounded in evidence and legal requirements. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive review of all provided documentation, including references, and conducting a thorough interview to verify the applicant's stated purpose for a Category H license, target pistol shooting. This approach directly addresses the requirements of the Arms Act 1983, specifically sections relating to the suitability of an applicant and the genuine reason for possessing a firearm. The Act mandates that an applicant must demonstrate a genuine reason for possessing the firearm and be a fit and proper person. Verifying the applicant's stated purpose through multiple channels, including references and direct questioning, is crucial for establishing this genuine reason and assessing their suitability. This systematic and evidence-based method ensures compliance with the legal framework. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves approving the license solely based on the applicant's written statement and the absence of any immediate red flags in their personal history. This fails to meet the genuine reason requirement of the Arms Act 1983, which necessitates active verification beyond self-declaration. It also neglects the duty to conduct a reasonable inquiry into the applicant's suitability. Another incorrect approach is to deny the license based on a vague personal feeling of unease without concrete evidence or a clear breach of the Arms Act 1983. This is subjective and not legally defensible, as decisions must be based on established criteria and demonstrable grounds for concern, not mere intuition. Such an action could lead to an unfair refusal and potential legal challenge. A third incorrect approach is to approve the license immediately without any further verification, assuming the applicant is trustworthy because they have provided references. While references are part of the process, they are not a substitute for a comprehensive assessment that includes verifying the stated purpose and assessing overall suitability as mandated by the Act. This approach bypasses due diligence. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a structured decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the legal requirements of the Arms Act 1983 and relevant New Zealand police policies. Second, meticulously review all submitted documentation. Third, conduct a structured interview designed to elicit information relevant to the genuine reason and fit and proper person criteria. Fourth, corroborate information where necessary, including contacting references and verifying club membership if applicable. Finally, document all findings and the rationale for the decision, ensuring it is based on objective evidence and legal compliance. Question 14. Market research demonstrates a growing demand for target pistols among licensed individuals in New Zealand. A regular customer who has purchased firearms from your licensed dealership previously approaches you wanting to acquire a specific Category H target pistol. They present their current firearms license, which appears valid, but they have misplaced their permit to acquire. They express urgency, stating they need the pistol for an upcoming competition. What is the most responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the sale, accepting the customer's assurance that they will obtain the permit shortly after, and note this in your sales records. Option B. Politely explain that a valid permit to acquire is mandatory for the purchase and that the sale cannot proceed until it is obtained, offering to hold the pistol for them while they secure the permit. Option C. Sell the pistol to the customer, as they are a known and trusted client with a valid firearms license, and they can apply for the permit retrospectively. Option D. Sell the pistol to the customer, but advise them to apply for the permit as soon as possible, and consider it a minor administrative oversight that can be rectified later. The correct answer is B. Politely explain that a valid permit to acquire is mandatory for the purchase, and that the sale cannot proceed until it is obtained, offering to hold the pistol for them while they secure the permit. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand, because it involves balancing business interests with strict legal obligations and ethical responsibilities concerning the sale of firearms. The Firearms Act 1983 and its associated regulations in New Zealand are designed to ensure public safety by controlling access to firearms. A dealer must exercise due diligence and adhere to these regulations meticulously, even when faced with potential financial gain or customer pressure. The core ethical consideration is preventing firearms from falling into the wrong hands, which directly impacts community safety. The best professional approach involves a thorough and documented verification process that strictly adheres to the requirements of the Arms Act 1983 and the Arms Regulations 1984. This includes confirming the validity of the customer's Category H firearms license, ensuring it is current and appropriate for the intended purchase, e.g., a pistol for target shooting, and completing all necessary documentation, such as the permit to acquire. The dealer must also be satisfied that the customer is a fit and proper person to possess the firearm, which may involve discreet inquiries or observing the customer's demeanor and stated intentions, all while respecting privacy laws. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and public safety above all else, an approach that involves accepting the customer's word without independent verification of their license status or the permit to acquire is a significant regulatory failure. It bypasses the legal safeguards designed to prevent unauthorized firearm acquisition. This demonstrates a disregard for the Arms Act 1983, which mandates specific checks. Ethically, it creates an unacceptable risk of a firearm being acquired by someone who is not legally permitted to do so, potentially leading to harm. Another unacceptable approach is to proceed with the sale based on a past transaction history with the customer, assuming their license remains valid. While a good customer relationship is valuable, it does not absolve the dealer of their statutory duty to verify current licensing and obtain a permit to acquire for each new transaction. This oversight constitutes a breach of the Arms Regulations 1984 and an ethical lapse in due diligence, as license status can change. Finally, an approach that involves expediting the sale by overlooking minor discrepancies in the license or permit, or by assuming the customer will rectify them later, is also professionally unsound. The Arms Act 1983 requires strict adherence to the prescribed documentation and verification procedures. Any deviation, however minor it may seem, undermines the integrity of the firearms control system and exposes the dealer to legal penalties and ethical condemnation for potentially facilitating an unsafe transaction. Professionals in this field should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the legal requirements under the Arms Act 1983 and Arms Regulations 1984. This should be followed by a systematic checklist for verifying customer identity, license validity, and permit to acquire status. Any doubt or ambiguity should lead to pausing the transaction and seeking clarification from the customer or, if necessary, the New Zealand police. Prioritizing legal compliance and ethical responsibility ensures the integrity of the firearms licensing system and contributes to public safety. Question 15. The performance metrics show a pattern of minor but repeated breaches of safe firearm handling protocols by a Category H license holder in Auckland, who primarily uses their pistol for competitive target shooting. As a licensee approval officer, what is the most appropriate initial course of action? Option A. Immediately recommend the cancellation of the licensee's Category H firearms license due to the repeated breaches, citing public safety concerns. Option B. Advise the licensee that while the breaches are noted, they are considered minor and no further action is required at this stage, assuming the licensee will self-correct. Option C. Conduct a thorough investigation, including gathering all relevant reports and evidence, followed by a formal interview with the licensee to discuss the concerns and assess their understanding of safe handling and storage requirements under New Zealand's Arms Act 1983. Option D. Discuss the licensee's performance issues with their target shooting club committee to seek their input and potentially leverage peer pressure for improvement. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough investigation, including gathering all relevant reports and evidence, followed by a formal interview with the licensee to discuss the concerns and assess their understanding of safe handling and storage requirements under New Zealand's Arms Act 1983. Explanation: the performance metrics show a concerning trend in the safe handling and storage of firearms by a licensee. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the licensee's right to possess a firearm for their stated purpose, target pistol shooting, with the paramount public safety obligations mandated by New Zealand's Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations. The licensee approval officer must exercise careful judgment to ensure compliance without being overly punitive or dismissive of legitimate sporting activities. The best professional approach involves a thorough, objective investigation into the reported incidents. This means gathering all available evidence, including incident reports, witness statements, and any relevant communication with the licensee. Following this, a formal interview with the licensee is crucial to understand their perspective, explain the seriousness of the concerns, and assess their understanding of safe storage and handling requirements. Based on this comprehensive assessment, the officer can then determine the appropriate course of action, which might range from issuing a formal warning and requiring remedial training to, in severe or repeated cases, initiating the process for license review or cancellation. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of natural justice, ensuring the licensee has an opportunity to respond to allegations, and it directly addresses the potential risks to public safety as required by the Arms Act 1983, specifically sections relating to the safe storage and handling of firearms and the suitability of a licensee. An incorrect approach would be to immediately recommend license cancellation based solely on the initial performance metrics without further investigation. This fails to provide the licensee with due process and presumes guilt without allowing them to explain or rectify the situation. It also overlooks the possibility that the issues might be minor or due to a misunderstanding that can be addressed through education or supervision, which is contrary to the graduated response principles often implied in regulatory enforcement. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the concerns as minor operational issues and take no further action, assuming the licensee is generally competent. This is ethically and regulatorily unsound, as it neglects the explicit duty of the Arms Act 1983 to ensure firearms are possessed by fit and proper persons who will at all times exercise the care, control, and responsibility that the possession of firearms requires. Ignoring reported issues, even if seemingly minor, creates a potential risk to public safety and undermines the integrity of the licensing system. Finally, an approach that involves publicly discussing the licensee's performance issues with other club members or the wider community would be a severe breach of privacy and professional conduct. This is not only unethical, but could also have legal ramifications, and it does nothing to address the actual safety concerns in a structured, regulatory manner. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence-based assessment, adherence to legal and regulatory requirements, fairness to the individual, and the overriding imperative of public safety. This involves a systematic process of information gathering, objective analysis, fair communication, and proportionate action. Question 16. Stakeholder feedback indicates that an applicant for a New Zealand Category H firearms license, intending to use a target pistol for competitive shooting, has a history of significant domestic disputes with a former partner, although no charges were ever laid. As the firearms officer responsible for assessing the application, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Deny the firearms license application outright based on the reported history of domestic disputes, as this raises concerns about the applicant's suitability. Option B. Approve the firearms license application immediately, as the applicant has no criminal convictions and has stated a legitimate purpose for firearm ownership. Option C. Conduct discrete inquiries into the applicant's personal history, specifically regarding the reported domestic disputes, to gather further information before making a decision. Option D. Dismiss the stakeholder feedback as irrelevant, given the applicant's stated intention for target shooting and the absence of any formal legal action. The correct answer is C. Conduct discrete inquiries into the applicant's personal history, specifically regarding the reported domestic disputes, to gather further information before making a decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the applicant's stated intention for a firearms license with potential undisclosed risks and the paramount duty to public safety. The applicant's history of domestic disputes, even if resolved, raises concerns about their temperament and judgment, which are critical factors in assessing suitability for firearm ownership under New Zealand's Arms Act 1983. The firearms officer must exercise discretion and thoroughness, adhering to the principles of responsible firearm ownership and the licensing authority's obligations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves conducting a comprehensive background check that includes discrete inquiries into the applicant's personal history, specifically focusing on the reported domestic disputes. This approach directly addresses the concerns raised by the stakeholder feedback and aligns with the Arms Act 1983, which requires the licensing authority to be satisfied that an applicant is a fit and proper person to possess a firearm. This includes considering any history that might indicate a propensity for violence or poor judgment. Discrete inquiries allow for the gathering of relevant information without prejudicing the applicant unnecessarily, while still fulfilling the duty of care to the public. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the stakeholder feedback outright due to the applicant's stated intention for target shooting and the absence of a criminal conviction. This fails to acknowledge that the Arms Act 1983 requires a broader assessment of suitability than just the absence of convictions. Domestic disputes, even without charges, can indicate underlying issues relevant to firearm safety. Another incorrect approach is to immediately deny the license based solely on the reported domestic disputes without further investigation. This would be premature and potentially unfair, as it assumes guilt or unsuitability without due process or gathering all relevant facts. The licensing authority must investigate thoroughly before making a decision. A further incorrect approach is to approve the license without any further investigation, relying solely on the applicant's assurances and the absence of a criminal record. This neglects the proactive duty of the licensing authority to ensure public safety and to thoroughly vet all applicants, especially when red flags have been raised. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to license applications. This involves 1. Acknowledging and thoroughly investigating all information received, including stakeholder feedback. 2. Conducting all necessary background checks as mandated by the Arms Act 1983, including inquiries into personal history where relevant. 3. Applying a balanced judgment, considering all factors, to determine if the applicant is a fit and proper person. 4. Documenting all steps taken and the rationale for the final decision. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates a firearms safety instructor in New Zealand is assessing an applicant for a Category H endorsement for target pistol shooting. The applicant has provided all required documentation and references and appears generally cooperative, but the instructor has a subtle, unarticulated feeling that the applicant might not be entirely forthcoming about their true intentions for acquiring the pistol. What is the most appropriate course of action for the instructor to take? Option A. Conduct a thorough, objective interview and review of all submitted documentation, focusing on verifying the applicant's stated purpose for target shooting and assessing their overall suitability as a fit and proper person, according to the Arms Act 1983 and its regulations. Option B. Approve the endorsement promptly to avoid delaying the applicant's sporting pursuits, assuming their documentation is in order and there are no overt red flags. Option C. Immediately deny the endorsement based on the instructor's gut feeling that the applicant might not be entirely truthful, without further investigation. Option D. Question the applicant extensively about unrelated personal matters to gauge their general character, even if it goes beyond the scope of the firearms license application. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough, objective interview and review of all submitted documentation, focusing on verifying the applicant's stated purpose for target shooting and assessing their overall suitability as a fit and proper person, according to the Arms Act 1983 and its regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms safety instructor in New Zealand concerning a firearms license holder applying for Category H endorsement for target pistol shooting. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's stated intent with potential underlying risks, requiring careful judgment to uphold public safety and regulatory compliance without unfairly prejudicing the applicant. The instructor must navigate the ethical obligation to ensure safe firearm ownership against the principle of fairness and the applicant's right to pursue a legitimate sporting activity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, objective assessment of the applicant's suitability, focusing on verifiable information and adherence to the Arms Act 1983 and its regulations. This approach requires the instructor to diligently review the applicant's submitted documentation, conduct a comprehensive interview, and consider any relevant information provided by referees or law enforcement, all while maintaining a neutral and professional demeanor. The instructor must assess whether the applicant meets the criteria for a Category H endorsement, specifically regarding their stated purpose for acquiring the pistol, target shooting, and their overall suitability to possess such a firearm, as mandated by Section 24 of the Arms Act 1983, which outlines the requirements for license endorsements. This includes ensuring the applicant has a genuine reason for the endorsement and is a fit and proper person. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately denying the endorsement based on a vague personal feeling of unease or a perceived lack of enthusiasm from the applicant. This is ethically flawed as it relies on subjective judgment rather than objective evidence and regulatory criteria. It fails to uphold the principle of fairness and may constitute discrimination if not based on demonstrable risk factors outlined in the legislation. Another incorrect approach is to approve the endorsement without conducting a sufficiently detailed interview or verifying the applicant's stated purpose. This bypasses the instructor's duty of care and regulatory responsibility to ensure the applicant is genuinely intending to use the firearm for the specified purpose and is otherwise suitable. It creates a potential public safety risk by overlooking red flags that might have been uncovered through proper due diligence. A further incorrect approach is to pressure the applicant into providing information beyond what is reasonably required by the Arms Act 1983 and its regulations, or to make assumptions about their intentions based on stereotypes. This infringes on the applicant's privacy and can lead to a biased assessment, undermining the integrity of the licensing process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes objective evidence and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal requirements for the license category and endorsement, Arms Act 1983 and relevant regulations. 2. Conducting a thorough and impartial assessment of the applicant's stated purpose and suitability, using established interview techniques and documentation review. 3. Seeking corroborating evidence where necessary, such as referee reports or background checks, as permitted by law. 4. Documenting all findings and the rationale for the decision meticulously. 5. Remaining objective and avoiding personal biases or assumptions. 6. Consulting with supervisors or legal counsel if faced with ambiguity or complex ethical considerations. Question 18. Performance analysis shows that an applicant for New Zealand Category H firearms license has declared a history of several minor altercations, none of which resulted in a criminal conviction. The applicant states these were isolated incidents and that their primary interest is competitive target pistol shooting. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing authority? Option A. Request additional character references specifically addressing the applicant's temperament and suitability for target shooting without conducting a personal interview. Option B. Conduct a personal interview with the applicant to discuss their history and assess their suitability, alongside a thorough review of all submitted documentation. Option C. Approve the license immediately, as the applicant has no criminal convictions and the altercations are not directly related to the intended use of a target pistol. Option D. Reject the application based on the history of altercations, as this indicates a potential lack of judgment and temperament unsuitable for firearm ownership. The correct answer is B. Conduct a personal interview with the applicant to discuss their history and assess their suitability, alongside a thorough review of all submitted documentation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's stated intent for a firearms license with potential underlying risks that are not immediately apparent. The applicant's history of minor altercations, while not directly disqualifying for a Category H license in New Zealand, raises a flag regarding their temperament and judgment, which are critical considerations for safe firearm ownership. The core ethical and regulatory tension lies in the obligation to process applications fairly and efficiently while upholding public safety and the integrity of the firearms licensing system. A thorough and objective assessment is paramount. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of all provided documentation and a direct, professional interview with the applicant. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of due diligence mandated by the Arms Act 1983 and the Arms Regulations 1992 in New Zealand. Specifically, the Act requires the licensing authority to be satisfied that an applicant is a fit and proper person to possess a firearm. This involves assessing not only the absence of explicit disqualifications, but also the applicant's general character, temperament, and likelihood of responsible firearm use. A personal interview allows for direct observation of the applicant's demeanor, the opportunity to probe concerning aspects of their history, like the altercations, and to clarify any ambiguities in their application or supporting documents. This proactive, investigative stance ensures a robust assessment of risk. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the applicant's history of altercations as irrelevant to a target pistol license. This fails to acknowledge that even for target shooting, responsible handling, and a stable temperament are crucial. The Arms Act does not limit its fit and proper assessment to only those firearms used in specific activities. It encompasses the applicant's overall suitability. Another incorrect approach is to approve the license solely based on the absence of a criminal conviction for a violent offense. This is a superficial assessment that overlooks the broader implications of an applicant's behavioral history on their capacity for safe firearm ownership. The regulations require a more holistic evaluation. Finally, rejecting the application outright based on the altercations without further investigation or interview would be procedurally unfair and potentially discriminatory, failing to provide the applicant with an opportunity to explain or mitigate concerns, and thus not meeting the requirements for a fair and thorough assessment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes thoroughness, fairness, and adherence to regulatory requirements. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting all information provided, including potentially concerning details. 2. Identifying areas requiring further clarification or investigation. 3. Engaging with the applicant directly to address these areas. 4. Making a decision based on a comprehensive understanding of the applicant's suitability, considering all relevant factors against the legal and ethical standards of the Arms Act 1983 and its regulations. Question 19. The efficiency study reveals that a licensed New Zealand firearms dealer selling Category H firearms is experiencing increased demand. A potential customer presents a valid Category H firearms license and expresses a strong desire to purchase a specific target pistol. However, the dealer has no prior knowledge of the customer's target shooting club membership or their history of participation in the sport. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action for the dealer? Option A. Prioritize the sale to meet demand, accepting the customer's word that they are a legitimate target shooter without further verification. Option B. Proceed with the sale based solely on the validity of the firearms license, assuming the customer's intentions are lawful for target shooting. Option C. Sell the firearm and advise the customer to obtain club membership and confirm their participation after the purchase. Option D. Conduct thorough due diligence by verifying the applicant's current membership in an approved target shooting club and confirming their active participation in the sport, documenting these checks before proceeding with the sale. Correct answer is D. Conduct thorough due diligence by verifying the applicant's current membership in an approved target shooting club and confirming their active participation in the sport, documenting these checks before proceeding with the sale. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict of interest for licensed firearms dealers in New Zealand concerning the sale of Category H target pistol firearms. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the dealer to balance their business interests with their legal and ethical obligations to ensure firearms are only sold to individuals who are genuinely licensed and intend to use them for lawful purposes, specifically target shooting in this case. The dealer must avoid any perception or reality of facilitating the diversion of firearms to unauthorized individuals or for illicit purposes, which could have severe public safety implications. The best professional approach involves a rigorous and documented verification process that goes beyond simply checking the validity of a firearms license. This includes actively confirming the applicant's stated purpose for acquiring the target pistol aligns with the conditions of their Category H license, such as membership in an approved target shooting club and evidence of regular participation. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the requirements of the Arms Act 1983 and the Arms Regulations 1992 in New Zealand, which mandate that firearms dealers take all reasonable steps to ensure a purchaser is lawfully entitled to possess the firearm. Furthermore, it upholds the ethical duty of a firearms dealer to act responsibly and contribute to public safety by preventing firearms from falling into the wrong hands. Documenting these checks provides a clear audit trail and demonstrates due diligence. An approach that involves accepting a valid license without further inquiry into the applicant's specific target shooting activities or club affiliation is incorrect. This fails to meet the all reasonable steps requirement of the Arms Act, as a license alone does not guarantee the ongoing legitimacy of the intended use or the applicant's current suitability. It creates a loophole where a license could be obtained for target shooting, but the firearm subsequently used for other purposes. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the sale and assume the applicant is acting in good faith solely based on their possession of a license. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for the potential risks associated with firearms sales. It prioritizes commercial gain over public safety and legal compliance. Finally, an approach that involves selling the firearm and advising the buyer to figure out the club membership later is highly irresponsible and legally deficient. This actively undermines the licensing system and demonstrates a willful ignorance of the dealer's obligations. It is a direct contravention of the spirit and letter of firearms legislation, which requires a clear and lawful purpose for firearm acquisition at the point of sale. Professionals in this situation should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Understanding the specific requirements of the Arms Act 1983 and Arms Regulations 1992 regarding firearms sales, particularly for restricted categories like H. 2. Implementing robust internal procedures for verifying license validity and intended use, including documentation. 3. Exercising professional judgment to assess the legitimacy of the purchase and not hesitating to refuse a sale if any doubts arise. 4. Seeking clarification from the New Zealand police if unsure about specific circumstances or interpretations of the law. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that a potential customer wishes to purchase a specific Category H target pistol from your licensed firearms dealership in New Zealand. The customer presents a firearms license that appears valid, with an expiry date several months away. However, the license category listed is for sporting firearms, and the customer claims they have applied for an endorsement for target pistols, which they expect to receive shortly. The customer is eager to complete the purchase today. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with New Zealand firearms legislation and ethical practice? Option A. Proceed with the sale, accepting the customer's assurance that they have applied for the endorsement and will receive it soon, and make a note of this in the sales record. Option B. Sell the pistol but advise the customer to obtain the correct license endorsement as soon as possible, and document that the sale was made based on their verbal confirmation of an impending endorsement. Option C. Politely decline the sale, explaining that the current license category does not permit the purchase of a Category H target pistol, and that the sale can only proceed once the customer provides a firearms license explicitly authorizing the purchase of Category H firearms, with all details verified with the New Zealand police. Option D. Sell the pistol, assuming that a sporting firearms license implicitly covers target pistols, and rely on the customer's honesty to inform the authorities if their endorsement is not granted. The correct answer is C. Politely decline the sale, explaining that the current license category does not permit the purchase of a Category H target pistol, and that the sale can only proceed once the customer provides a firearms license explicitly authorizing the purchase of Category H firearms, with all details verified with the New Zealand Police. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearms dealer in New Zealand when assessing a potential buyer for a Category H target pistol license. The challenge lies in balancing the legal requirements for license verification with the ethical obligation to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands, particularly when faced with incomplete or potentially misleading information. The dealer must exercise due diligence and apply sound judgment to ensure compliance with the Arms Act 1983 and its associated regulations, while also upholding public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a meticulous and documented verification process. This includes confirming the applicant's identity, verifying the validity and category of their firearms license directly with the New Zealand Police, the issuing authority, and ensuring the license permits the purchase of the specific Category H pistol. The dealer should also assess if the applicant meets all other legal requirements for possession, such as secure storage arrangements, as mandated by the Arms Act. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the legal framework, prioritizing official verification and compliance with all statutory obligations, thereby minimizing the risk of illegal acquisition and ensuring public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting the applicant's word and the presented license without independent verification. This fails to meet the due diligence requirements of the Arms Act, which places the onus on the dealer to ensure the license is valid and appropriate for the intended purchase, creates a significant risk of an unlicensed or prohibited person acquiring a firearm. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the sale based on a partial verification, such as only checking the license expiry date but not confirming its current validity or category with the police. This is a regulatory failure as it bypasses crucial checks designed to prevent misuse. The Arms Act requires comprehensive verification, not just superficial checks. A third incorrect approach is to assume that because the applicant has a license, they are automatically suitable to purchase any firearm. This overlooks the specific categories of licenses and firearms, and the dealer's responsibility to ensure the license permits the purchase of the particular Category H pistol in question. It also neglects the broader ethical responsibility to consider the applicant's overall suitability and the potential risks associated with the transaction. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding the legal obligations. Thorough knowledge of the Arms Act 1983 and relevant regulations is paramount. 2. Information gathering and verification. Always seek official confirmation for all critical details, especially license validity and category. 3. Risk assessment. Evaluate the potential risks associated with each transaction, considering both legal compliance and public safety. 4. Documentation. Maintain detailed records of all verification steps and decisions made. 5. Ethical considerations. Act with integrity and prioritize public safety above commercial expediency.